Good morning. Happy Thursday. One of the questions that came up with Jeff Gray was, what kind of political disagreements do I have with him? People have been watching him for years and aren't aware of his politics. And I think that's simply because you just agree with his politics. Pushing panhandling. I mean, panhandling is pretty odious. I don't like panhandlers. You might think that makes me a bad person. I personally believe you don't help someone by giving them money. You encourage them, in my opinion, to stay homeless and broke. So that's a political position that I have that Jeff doesn't have. And Jeff has the opposite political opinion, and that's fine. Another political opinion that Jeff Gray has that I don't have is that if a black person is stopped by a white officer, then that is racism. I disagree with that. You may find this hard to believe, but more black people are arrested in cities with high amounts of black police officers than are arrested in cities with high amounts of white police officers. And I think the reason for that is there's more black police officers in cities with high black populations. You go to someplace like Baltimore, very high percentage of black officers on the police force. You go to Chicago, high percentage of black police officers on the police force. The high arrest rates don't seem to vary in the black population, don't seem to vary by the demographic breakdown of the police force itself. Freddie Gray was one that just it blew my mind. Everybody's like, it's racism. But there were black officers involved in the arrest of Freddie Gray. And it was a black police chief who ran the police force. And it was a black district attorney that was involved in the investigation of these police officers. And there was a black mayor and a majority black city council. And the president of the United States at the time was a black man. So I'm just, in my head, I'm just thinking, maybe it's not racism. Maybe it's not. Maybe Freddie Gray wasn't a victim of racism. I mean, you might call me a racist because I'm a white guy saying that maybe Freddie Gray wasn't the victim of racism because there was a lot of black people involved in that whole thing and supervision, etc. Maybe you're of the political opinion that there's some sort of inherent, internalized white racism that black people in positions of power have against other black people or something. I don't really know. I don't really care. But anyway, I'm just talking about Jeff Gray's political views, and I don't want to get too far afield. So anyway, yesterday he did a video that he entitled something along the lines of "Charged for DWB, driving while black." And it's really easy to discount this video pretty much across the board. The first thing that happens is you see cars going by. Now, I challenge you, slow that video down as much as you want to. Go frame by frame. Now, pick out for me the people in that car or in those cars that you can identify by race. I'll wait. Pause this video or stop this video. Go watch Jeff's video. Come back and tell me how many people in those cars you can identify by their race in any of the cars that go by. And also tell me how many cars went by before Jeff starts his video. What happened before the video started rolling? Because Jeff chose that moment to start the video. Jeff chose that moment. Or somebody chose that moment. Because if he's just sitting there in his car with vehicles going by, what was it? The county that he was in was like Columbia County, Florida, which has something around, and you could check this on Wikipedia, 60% demographically is black. That county, 60%. So basically 1 out of every 7 people is going to be black. So if 7 cars go by, 1 car is going to have black people. So how many cars went by? How many cars specifically with black people went by before the officer pulled out? You don't know. I don't know. Jeff doesn't know. So that's issue number one. Issue number two is he says that Jeff says, the cop was able to see that there are black people in the car, and that's why he chose to pull him over. But the lights, the illumination on the tail on the tag, the officer was incorrect about. Well, if you grant Jeff's assumption that the officer could see what you can't see, because you can't see the tags in the video. You don't know if the tag was illuminated when that car went by. You don't know if there's some sort of a loose connection, some electrical problem. You don't know. You don't know if they have a switch that can kill that tag in the video, or from the video. You don't know if there's like some switch in the car that they could manipulate to turn that tag light on and off. You don't know. I'm not saying they do. I know I'm going to get a lot of dumb people who are like, oh, you're just pro cop. You're a cop sucker. No. I'm talking about Jeff's assumptions. I'm not saying that the cop did anything right. I'm not saying the cop did anything wrong. I'm not saying the driver did anything right. I'm not saying the driver did anything wrong. I'm talking about Jeff's assumption. He assumes the cop can see the race of the people going by. He assumes that the cop can see things that you and I can't. But then all of a sudden he's like, oh, on the tag, oh, no, the tag was properly functioning. Well, the tag was properly functioning when they checked it. And I want you to note that when they check it, the driver puts his hand underneath the light so that he could see the light from the license plate illumination light. Why does he do that? Well, because the lights from the police cruiser and the reflective surface of the license plate make it difficult to tell whether that tag is illuminated. Which stands to reason. Now, what was the cop's reaction? And I'm not saying cops can't lie. Cops can and do lie. But when the cop pulls the guy over and he asks for the license, the driver's like, well, my license is suspended. But I'm just driving to work. And the cop was like, well, if you're just driving to work, I'm not going to hassle you on it. I'm going to, we'll just check you out and we'll see. And then, I'll give you a warning or a ticket or something, right? It's a citation. It's not a charge. He's not going to arrest the guy for a tag light being out, right? So he's not going to arrest the guy for a tag light being out. But the guy has like 12, I think, previous tickets for driving on a suspended license. He's a repeat offender. And there's a provision in the Florida statutes where repeat offenders, if you have 3 or more driving on a suspended license, I believe it's a misdemeanor. So that's an arrestable offense. Is the cop arresting him for being black, or is the cop arresting him for being a repeat offender driving on a suspended license? And then, of course, they find there's an arrest. So there's going to be a search of the vehicle. They find apparently narcotics in the vehicle. And so he's going to be charged on the narcotics as well. Again, not for being black. So the assumption that Jeff Gray made that he was going to be charged, that he was charged for driving while black, I think is completely incorrect. There are a lot of people who are black who live in Columbia County. There are a lot of them. And there's also this little thing called a judicial review. Anytime someone gets arrested, they get brought in front of a magistrate or a judge or some sort of a judicial officer. What they call that judicial officer may depend on your state. But that judicial officer is going to make some determinations. Is there probable cause? Was there probable cause for the arrest? And I want to remind everybody that number one, police officers can make mistakes of fact and still have reasonable suspicion and or probable cause. They can also make mistakes of law. A reasonable mistake of law can still give them probable cause or reasonable suspicion. Now, the officer may have made a mistake on whether or not that taillight was properly illuminated. He may have made a mistake on the fact of it being properly illuminated. He may have made a mistake on the specific law requiring illumination. Because I believe, number one, he said, I pulled you over because your tail lamp wasn't illuminated. And then he goes on later to say, well, when you went by, I couldn't see illumination on the taillight. That's a mistake of fact. The question is it a reasonable mistake of fact? How many people went by before this particular driver went by? that the officer saw their tags and determined that they were or were not properly illuminated. We don't know. The officer may have made a mistake of law because he said that it has to be illuminated. I think he made some sort of specific kind of illumination that had to be. I believe the Florida statute for illumination of a tag requires that it be illuminated sufficient that you could read it at a specific distance. So maybe the officer made a mistake of law. But the question that's going to come in front of the judge is whether or not it's a reasonable mistake of fact and a reasonable mistake of law. If in fact it was a mistake of fact or law. So again, that's the point of this is that Jeff Gray has an opinion about that stop based solely, in my opinion, on the fact that the officer was white and the driver of the vehicle was black. From that, he determined that it was racism and that the driver was charged for driving while black. Obviously, the driver was not charged driving while black. He was charged with possession and being a repeat offender for driving on a suspended license. And whether or not it was racism that caused the officer to pull the driver over, I don't see any indication of that. I don't see any reason to believe that the officer could tell the race of the driver when the driver passed. I don't see any reason to believe that. But Jeff does. And that's his political position. And now you have my political position. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.